Today we're talking about Before Your Eyes, the game that uses a webcam to scan your eyes and progresses you through life and through the scenes when it senses you blink. So yeah, if you're listening from this point, we're going into full spoiler territory. If you haven't played the game Before Your Eyes, go play it, come back and join us. And yeah, I personally could not get a webcam working on my computer, so I ended up having to use like the secondary control scheme of like clicking whenever you blink, so to speak. And I actually thought it was still quite effective. I gave myself like the really strict parameter of like, okay, if I blink, I'm going to click no matter what. Like even if I want to keep going in a scene or something, I'm like, okay, I blinked, I have to click, I have to go. Oh. So the first question I wanted to ask you guys about Before Your Eyes is what you knew about the game going into it. Because personally, the only thing I'd ever seen on the game was the Jacob Geller video documentary about it. And I thought that that video would have like really spoiled a lot for me. So I wasn't expecting to really get a whole lot out of the game through playing it. But I found like he did a really good job of like delving into what the game was without spoiling it, at least for me anyway. Scott, what about you? What did you think? What did you know about it?
I had no information prior to playing other than I needed a webcam.
Apparently, you don't even really need one because I didn't use one.
I don't know if the game needed to use a webcam for it to get the point across. I understood why, just due to the fact that it's called Before Your Eyes in reference to your life flashing before your eyes.
Mhm.
And the blinking aspect of it was kind of fun, but I was absolutely iron-eyed the entire time, just eyes wide open as much as I could. And I would do it for scenes for as long as possible, and then it would still just skip through certain ones.
Oh, really?
There's very specific scenes in the game where it actually skips ahead no matter what.
Oh, which scene is that?
There's one where your mom answers the phone, and then
Oh.
that's later on revealed that she's talking to her dad who just passed away.
Or talking to somebody telling her that the dad passed away.
It's when she picks up the phone and someone has told her that her father has passed away. Presumably not her own dad. Yes. Thank you.
I'm dead. I can't come visit you.
You disappointed me and now I'm dead.
Okay, cool. Well, that's good. So you got to see it with pretty fresh eyes, so to speak.
Yes.
Um, Dylan, what about you?
With Fresh Eyes, the sequel to Before Your Eyes. For me, I was in much the same boat as you, Levi, where I encountered the game first with the Jacob Geller essay. I've seen a lot of the game, so I know what 80% of this is going to be like going into it, but I'm still interested and it's, relatively inexpensive. So when it went on sale, I got it. I was actually impressed at how much Geller did not spoil with that video and how
Yeah.
much there was to the game. In terms of the mechanics, I'm a little bit torn
Mm.
in terms of the blinking aspect because it's very clear from how you're talking, Levi, that you got at least a fair bit out of the game without the blinking requirement.
Hmm.
I felt like it was a good control mechanic. It was good for eliciting like feelings in terms of like you're kind of focused really hard on what you're doing and trying to control the scene with the blinking. I'm not sure it really necessarily worked that well considering what the story was being told because I felt that it introduced a certain competitive aspect, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about because like I just previously said, was just keeping my eyes open as long as possible. No
Yeah.
Visine.
Yeah.
He's a real champion. Um, yeah, it introduces a certain competitive aspect where it's like you have to focus and get yourself through the scene in a way that I felt like the story really wasn't about at all. The blinking aspect makes it seem like you want to hold on as long as possible, else you're going to lose something with blinking and lose some information because that's the main sort of punishment for blinking
Yeah.
because the story is not about competition the way the blinking mechanic makes it. With that said, I do find that blinking mechanics was done pretty well. I was surprised at how well paced it was. Like for each scene, you get a certain amount of time where you don't have to focus, and then the counter starts where if you blink, it's going to move forward. And I felt like it was surprisingly well paced. I cannot stare for a long time. I'm not as iron-eyed as Scott.
I have a little workaround for blinking, by the way.
Oh?
If you actually wink, it does not count as a blink.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
So
interesting.
if you could close one eye and look around, and then you could close the
Cheater.
other one.
Cheater. That's so
So
funny.
the other thing is that it definitely doesn't really have perfect sensitivity. For me, I was often squinting, but
Yeah.
like my squints eventually would count as blinks and
Oh.
went forward.
Yeah, there were times for me as well where I'm just like, come on, I did not blink. There's no way.
Yeah, so I often like winced and then it went forward. So I kept turning the sensitivity down, but it got to the point where like I had to like definitively blink hard in order to move the scene forward.
Huh.
Like I'm pretty sure some blinks I gave it wouldn't register.
Okay.
If so I turned it down.
Did you actually go in to calibrate?
Yeah, I recalibrate a few times.
Right.
Which I think they expect you to do that because there's an achievement for recalibrating 10 times.
Yeah, I remember getting that actually. Levi and I were talking about achievements because Levi, you went in and got one for what was it again?
Yeah, I had to choose between, I think it was going to Egypt or wanting to go to Egypt or wanting to go to Greece. And I chose Greece and got an achievement for it. And I was just like, oh, okay, I guess that was a significant decision. But
So yeah, I found out that there was an achievement for that, but I didn't get either the Egypt or the Greece one.
Same. I'm gonna ask, when did that happen in the story?
yeah, that's
That
actually,
was when you were being shown the scrapbook of your parents.
oh, yes. Yeah, like how they met and they started
Oh.
traveling around a lot in their early
Yes.
Oh,
relationship.
I must
Mhm.
have blinked or something and not
You
gotten
blinked and
that.
you missed it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's that's interesting though, Scott, that you didn't even get that option. That brings me to something I wanted to ask about, like, how branching was the story and like because I was expecting to have like had a completely different experience with the game than you guys because of how many options and choices there are for like big life decisions, like should I go out and hang out with this girl or should I study piano more kind of thing.
Well, let's talk about what each person chose because
Yeah.
for that example there that you just gave us, when Chloe is phoning you, I picked up on the second ring because
Mm.
in my brain I'm just like, "Oh my god, this game is going to trick me somehow. She's dying or something." And it's like, "Okay, I'm going to pick up the phone." And of course, she just wants to talk about, let's be real, the next game for the podcast, Consters.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
the seashell Pokemon game.
Yep.
Yes. And so, of course, you getting shit from your mother. So, yeah, I ended up picking up the phone and then I decided to not meet up with her. And so that I did well on my piano the next morning.
Right. Yeah. I went the full like virtuoso route of like totally ditch Chloe and like only focus on my music because I personally didn't really like her character that much. I found she was kind of annoying a bit. And I was like, this mini game, even though it's not very in depth, of like trying to hit the piano keys in time. I was like, this is fun, and I like this music.
Oh, really? You liked it?
I
Okay.
liked it. Yeah, it was such a
I
great mini
could not
game.
think of a more basic way of doing it. But I mean,
Yeah.
the whole game isn't really about playing it, it's about the experience. I know.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
So wait a minute. When you because I actually did ditch and go hang out with Chloe.
Mm.
When you do that, do you actually do well on the piano recital?
What happens if you choose to ditch Chloe and like go to bed early and practice more with the piano is that you get this dream sequence where the piano like floats above you in bed and you get to practice literally do that mini game a bit more. Even though it's not a hard mini game, you get a bit more practice on it because when you get to the recital, the little lit up section on the piano keys is like a bit smaller at first, and so it's actually harder to stay in within that parameter. And so I was like, oh, okay, wow, like this actually like paid off. Like I practiced more, and so I'm more likely to get this. I'm gonna nail this tryout. But consequently, I went back recently just to test something out. Just before we started recording here, I logged back into the game and I went to that specific scene. And I purposefully didn't hit many of the keys. Like I was missing them on purpose. And the voice line that like the professor from the school or of for music or whatever, he was like, "Wow, he is such a talented child. How did you how did you train such a young child to play so well?" And I'm purposely playing so bad.
Listen, I'm glad you went and did that because let's be real, the game has no weight behind any of its choices. And I could tell the moment that the game ended that none of the choices I made mattered at all.
Mhm.
Mm.
You know what? I think a good thing to do is like, let's air out the stuff that we did not like about the game first, so then we can end with the good stuff. Because
Yeah.
frankly, the game was technically not great in a
Mm.
technical term. Like the graphics, you can choose the simple graphics. Untitled Goose Game graphics are great, and I didn't mind them, but they were so lazy in some spots. There's parts where I can see through their mouth, through the back of their head. There's times where I can literally see that they didn't feather out the edges of certain graphics, so you can literally see things like it's like a sticker being placed on. It's
Oh
always
yeah.
January 7th.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I thought there was something more significant with that, so I kept on like paying attention to it to be like, "Hey, is this like are they trying to tell me something, like some sort of code? Is this date super significant for some reason?"
They didn't cull the seagulls when they flew off. I don't know if you looked around,
I
but if you
did.
look up, the gulls do not get culled like in every other video game. It's a very simple thing to do.
They just float there. Yeah, I
Yes.
noticed that as well.
I didn't notice that, but that's really
Listen,
funny.
I am fine with simple graphics, but they were so lazy.
Mm. It was a pretty small indie dev team that made the game, right?
Yeah, I guess
I
so,
th-
but
it was for me functional,
it was
and
functional. It was functional. You're right.
I thought that I did think at the very start that I really liked the voice acting and animation for Anubis in the opening scene specifically.
I'm glad you called him Anubis as well because I caught on to that with the lesson later on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I liked his voice acting and his like animation, but there was no other point in the game where I was like, "Oh, that's some really nice graphics." Like I really
Mhm.
didn't notice it. On the other hand, I didn't notice any of the issues that you're pointing out.
I'm not someone who's keen on pointing out every little flaw, but like it was starting to become glaring
Hmm.
in a lot of spots. I'm glad that you did mention the voice acting though, not just for Anubis, but I think everyone's voice acting was pretty spot on.
Yeah,
Mhm,
that's true. That was something that they clearly put more time and effort into.
mhm.
Yeah.
Regarding the graphics and stuff, I did notice a lot of the things you pointed out, Scott. I felt it didn't take away from the overall experience too much for me. So
It never does. It's just something that you notice.
it was sometimes like immersion breaking. Like you would notice some of these things and then it would kind of pull me out of the scene for a second to be like, oh, there's a floating seagull there, or I can see through the wall of this house all of a sudden.
Yeah, like seeing a coffee cup in Game of Thrones did not ruin it for me. That was ruined for other reasons that we all know. But yes, the voice acting and the characters I thought were very well done. And that is considering also the fact that I thought the characters were quite cliche.
Mhm.
Like they worked within the confines of what I thought were cliche characters and were still very well done.
Yeah,
You're talking about all the characters, like even Anubis and the mom and dad.
Not Anubis. Anubis, I will say, is maybe the standout and is sadly maybe not in the game enough.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree with you on that one. He was really cool actually. I didn't know he was Anubis for the longest time, and I didn't make that connection. Who was the other one?
I
The
Ma'at?
Mod,
Mahat?
I think.
Let's look it up. Let's look it up. But yeah, the lady who ushers people into the afterlife. She's got the wings on her arms and stuff.
Yeah, the way it's spelled, it would make me say Ma'at, but Mayet is another way
Mayette.
of a lot of people say it.
Okay.
I'm torn because I feel like actually it has some very standout characters. The three being Anubis, obviously, as we've already discussed. The mom is has a lot more depth than I give her credit for. And the thing that I think This is the okay, so my opinion of the game is very high overall. I
Hmm.
think one of the only things though I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of brilliant is not the control scheme or the concept in general. It's actually how they characterize Benjamin. I felt like he was a very strong protagonist when he doesn't say a damn word the entire time.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a lot of silent protagonists that don't have that same characterization through the world and the story.
Hmm.
Mhm.
He's not even like your typical protagonist either. Like he's kind of like a loner, weird kid. It's described as a bit of a shut-in with no friends. But I felt like I really did like his character, even though it is his character really is fleshed out more by some of the decisions you make. I felt like he was a good canvas for me to kind of project a bit of myself onto because he's so silent.
It's very interesting. I don't want to get into it too much because I want to save it for a little bit as we get deeper into the game. But I felt like the fact that so much of the world was reflective of his own decisions, especially decisions that you weren't aware that he was making as they first came up, I thought was extremely clever.
Oh, do you have any examples off the top of your head?
I mean, the fact that he is hiding information, I thought he was like being fairly truthful the entire time and like,
Right.
oh, there's clearly some information that was being hidden, like the phone call and the approaching the door at night that were like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm guess that's gonna be explained later.
Hmm.
I didn't quite realize what was going on, and even after the reveal, I was like, "Why did he hide that information?" And it was only as the story progressed, I'm like, "Oh, that's why these were important things to him, and why he held back the information during the initial run of the story."
Right.
Going back to the cliched characters, though, in terms of everyone else besides those three characters, I agree. And in fact, it kind of I'm kind of torn because by the time we're getting to the art school, I was starting to say, okay, this is getting to be really like cliche, like the really like snooty art teacher and the
So funny.
sellout agent. I'm like, this is getting very stereotypical. And then by the time you get to the end of the game and you realize that was all Benjamin making shit up.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, he was potentially using stereotypes in his story,
Mhm.
but then you go back and think, well, what about the like conservatory teacher or like the sort of flat love interest? Those are also kind of cliche characters, and they're as presented
Mhm.
theoretically. So as I said, I liked it when the cliches kind of meshed with the story, but there was also a lot of cliches that were just cliches.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's you have your typical silly but lovable dad and like the strict loving mother. And it's like there's always the neighbor girl that's just moved in next door and gonna pull the quiet kid out of his shell. And again, like you said, the snobby art teacher was hilarious, by the way.
Yeah, I thought he was really funny.
Yeah, it was
Well,
very funny. It was very funny putting like the random stuff together for the
yeah,
paintings. I kind of wish I could have seen some of yours because I'm sure we all did the exact same thing where the naked guy was on the bed and we put something to make it look like he's got a big
Yeah.
old heart
Oh,
on.
yeah.
yep,
Yeah, the big vase, like, stretching out from his
Oh
groin.
yeah, that's art, baby.
yep.
It's abstract.
It was I was like this is where the game was losing me, but it was really funny in retrospect that it was all fake. Like you make this like random collage of bullshit. It's like, everyone, look at this. This is true art.
It's
Oh yes, I
beautiful.
believe I actually wrote down a quote for this because it's oh yes. Wow, I'm stunned. The ironic sincerity of this piece is so sincerely ironic.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, about the art, and it was absolutely just goofing on the art world.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Um, Dylan, you brought up before. Oh no, sorry, no, you didn't. You brought up the art school before. It reminded me of going to the music recital and like trying out for the music school. At that point, it seemed very like stereotypical, like storyline of the kid practices and he's a genius musician and he's gonna go like through this huge character arc of going to school and like abandoning all his friends and stuff. At least that's in the storyline I was going down, like through my decisions. But what did you guys think about when you get the school acceptance letter, and what did you think of when you opened it up and read it?
I did not get that.
You didn't get that scene?
because I ditched and hung out with Chloe.
Oh,
And when I
okay.
went to the art school, I failed the recital.
It's interesting. I went down the middle and also failed. I thought that that was part of the storyline that we don't get into the musical school.
Okay, so I guess that does kind of show that some of the decisions do change the story a bit.
Does it?
Yeah, I guess it is a bit of an illusion of choice, but the key difference
Yeah.
there, yeah, the key difference there was that for that scene where you open up the acceptance letter, you still get denied, even though in my playthrough I like nailed the tryout, and even though he did so well, and the teacher's like, "You did incredible! What a genius of music and stuff." Like you
Yeah, I
still
did
get
not
the
get that at all.
yeah, like the letter's still like, "No, sorry, you didn't make it," and I actually was like floored when I saw that. I did not expect that. I was cheated a bit because like I practiced so hard on piano and stuff, and I made all the right decisions, and I still got denied.
Okay, so this is actually a good time to discuss the choice because I feel like me and Scott in particular might have differing opinions on this.
Mm.
I am okay with the fact that mechanically the choices didn't mean a damn thing because they're essentially aesthetic. They're filling in details about how you're interacting with the world. To me, it doesn't really matter that in the end, it doesn't really affect the overall course. So clearly, what's going on there is you're getting railroaded. Like, you can't go to the conservatory, you have to get sick, and you have to end up going to the art school. For me, it felt like a valid choice on my part where I slacked off and went stargazing. I don't know. Did you feel you actually were cheated by the game, or did it feel like you were cheated, like in general, like in story?
I guess that when I say cheated, I feel like it did a good job of putting me in the shoes of a young boy who had like practiced piano and sacrificed so much to getting good and then getting denied anyway. Like I was pretty immersed in that scene in particular where I felt my outrage and my disbelief of not getting in was like almost realistic. I felt like as if I had in my personal life had gone down that same road and got denied. I was like, "What? This is bullshit, man. Like, I'm never gonna touch the piano again. Like, the music industry and at school, they're a bunch of snobs. I hate it. I'm never gonna touch a piano."
Wow.
Yeah.
So you really got into the game, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, for that particular scene, I would say, I wasn't cheated by the game, I was cheated by life, man. The man got me down in that moment.
Life is just the worst, most unfair game.
Yep. Yeah. So you were saying before, you alluded to going through your initial life with Anubis and like that whole story that plays out with you going to the art school after being sick and then becoming a poor artist to a successful one, a painter, by putting a bunch of different blobs on a canvas and having that being beautiful art. And then you go back to the spirit world and you talk to Anubis. What did you guys think about the story going forward from there? Like you were alluding to there being some sort of like information being left out in those two particular scenes with the phone call and with the doors and like the sounds of the dogs or coyotes ravaging or eating something. Did you guys expect there to be that big of a change in the story though?
Sorry, eating something is one way to put it. Eating the baby cats is what they were eating, Levi.
Yes. Yes, yeah, it was baby
Quite
cats.
traumatizing. I thought he would have buried it because it was like a traumatic experience.
Mhm.
The other one that he buried was the one at the door when he approaches his parents' room. I skipped it. So actually, I accidentally blinked, so I wasn't sure if that was one that was for sure skipped, but I'm assuming it was because we went back and then you
Yeah.
have to close your eyes and listen.
Right.
That was maybe the one part where the eye mechanic was kind of cool, where you actually close your eyes and just listen.
Mhm.
I did feel the closing your eyes sections were quite evocative, especially because you're in darkness and you just have audio. Like that's like just a cheap way to get like you emotionally invested in it almost.
Yeah, it was a very emotional game. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. My eyes weren't watering just because my eyes had been open for so long. But yeah, so what did you guys think about the story that is initially put forth about like your adult life going and becoming a successful artist being not true and it being like the kind of imagination of a young boy who ends up getting super sick and dying? In that part where he gets sick in the first story, that is actually like the true That's like the branching off point where like the real Benjamin gets that sick and then he never recovers from that sickness and ends up dying. But he creates that story where it's like what his life would have been if he had gone past this point and lived a full life. What did you think about that?
I think it was a very appropriate way for a child to respond in seeing their life ending. They view themselves through other people's eyes as well when you're a kid. You don't really have the introspection yet. You're basing a lot of what you know about yourself off of what other people say. So when Benjamin writes that story about him being a loner and he views himself as a disappointment. I mean, throughout the entire story, there's mentions of him being developmentally challenged, possibly. He's not on the same neurotypical path as a lot of kids in school. Whether that's just a form of ADD or just developmental issues, we don't know. It's left up to your own imagination, but he doesn't view the world the same as everyone else.
Even though he is a very good like musician and piano player, and he does seem to have a bit of a knack for like photography too. He's a bit more artsy.
I mean, I'm not sure if I quite land on that interpretation of Benjamin. Although he is noted as being like a particularly quiet boy because he's a silent video game protagonist.
Well, of course. He is bad at math though. It was in the game.
Yes, I do
Okay,
remember he got a report card or a math test back, and he had like
that's right.
he failed it. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, that's the thing though. He views the world in a creative way where he's pointing at the zero to find it instead of finding it through mathematics.
Right.
He's like, "Hey, it's right here."
Yeah, he's clearly still intelligent. It's just
Yeah, sorry. I gotta refresh. What was the initial question on the Levi? You're asking about how the twist of the story.
yeah.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to the twist of like having it be revealed to you that that first playthrough of his life was mostly fabricated?
I thought the twist was very good. It came at a point when the story was getting a little bit cliche, and it turns out
Hmm.
that with the twist, it actually makes sense as to why it was getting cliche and why it felt like it was kind of running out of steam. Essentially, the way I interpret the overall point of the story is it's him, Benjamin. The story is Benjamin trying to bring together his life as he's dying and make sense of it and make it meaningful.
Hmm.
And the conflict between the high expectations he had placed upon him and that he placed upon himself through his family's history and what he was actually able to accomplish in his life, which is about as much as you would expect from an 11-year-old, and him working through those emotions. And I thought the twist really brought that around in a very powerful way.
I recall being very like caught off guard by the twist, and when you get put back into like his life, when you're sick and laying in bed, and you write the story of Benjamin, like his life going forward, you have like that typewriter and stuff. Once you finish that and give it to your mom, she has a really adverse reaction to it. Like she seems like like at first like the dad comes in and is like, "Hey bud, sorry, yeah, if your mom's just a little she can't talk to you right now. Like she'll talk to you in a bit," and you can overhear their conversation in the hallway. I remember being very taken aback by that, being like, "What the heck?" Like, because at that point I hadn't fully grasped the fact that that first life playthrough was mostly fabricated. I thought we were like kind of starting again from the beginning and like going more in depth into like the particular part where he was sick. Because in the first playthrough, I was like, that was pretty short. That was kind of weird. Okay.
Yeah. I felt like there was a little bit of information hidden there. I didn't appreciate that it was hiding a lot of information in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just remember being like almost I just really did not understand the mother in that moment where she's like, "I can't believe he wrote this. Like this isn't normal." Like blah blah blah. And I remember kind of getting mad at the mom, being like, "What the heck is her problem? What the, like this is a story he wrote." But I hadn't fully grasped the fact that like it was so almost like delusional kind of thing, like where it's
It
like,
was about himself, and he was being very honest about him. It's hard to listen to a loved one talk negatively about themselves.
Well,
yeah.
I think that's also the ambiguity in that moment where there is a way to write the letter, I think, that is wholly positive. But for me, I actually wrote like a mostly positive summary of my life, except I said in training, oh, my mom was like pretty demanding and harsh with me. And at first I thought, oh, is she reacting to that part of the letter? When no, it's the fact that he ended up also writing out the rest of his life and the fact that he's dying at the moment that she's really reacting to.
So I actually, when I reviewed my footage, I think it's actually ambiguous on whether he has written down the extent of his imaginative life. Because the dad only ever mentions the first part, which is the reality of his life. So I don't know if the stuff that he writes is actually talking about his imagined future.
So I think this is where it gets a bit ambiguous. For me, the fact that the start of that letter was exactly what I had told Anubis what my life was like, or not exactly what I told Anubis, but exactly what Anubis told about my life.
The way that
Mhm.
Anubis dictated it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the way he dictated it, it was meant for me to infer that it would also go on to describe everything after that point. And also part of my interpretation, this is really getting to the end game, but part of my interpretation of it is that Anubis and everything in the afterlife doesn't actually exist. It's all in Benjamin's head at the end. So my interpretation was that it was entirely like Benjamin trying to wrap around his life and trying to tell himself the story at the end, but actually it was a story that he wrote in the real world.
Mm.
Well, if you want to talk about ambiguity and endings, do you think Benjamin actually died?
I do.
Okay.
I actually, yeah, I thought it was pretty clear that he died,
Yeah.
at least from my interpretation of it.
When I reviewed the ending again, I kind of sat there for a second and was like, he didn't necessarily die there. In fact, it's quite inspirational when you pay attention that he just got blessed by the spirit of the cat.
Mhm.
So it kind of comes across as Mayette giving him a second chance at life. It's actually
Ah.
really a inspiring way of looking at it, at least the way that I all of a sudden had a different
Oh,
view on it.
Oh, I did not pick up on that at all.
that's interesting, but I feel like that's contradicted by like the last scene with the pain octopus, I guess is the way you describe it.
The visualization of pain.
Yeah, the visualization
Yeah,
of pain. I feel like the last scene where like it's literally it's getting bigger and bigger. You cannot use like you cannot eat, you cannot drink, you cannot use your pain button,
medication. Yeah.
your medication button. Thank you. You cannot do that, and it fully subsumes you. And then there's a white light. I interpret that pretty as unambiguously you're dying in that moment.
Mhm.
Like I thought it was fairly unambiguous.
Yeah.
Mm.
Hmm. I might have to look at it myself now again, Scott, to
Yeah,
see what you
it might
mean.
be worth revisiting because I don't dislike Scott's interpretation either.
No, that's I feel like I could really see that they would go in that route because
I would say it's a less depressing ending for a very depressing game that really bummed me out.
I mean, it would make sense though that he would actually die because especially in that last bit, he's very realistic about his life and like at least in the route I chose to write about myself, I was very honest about how like he was a bit of a loner, a bit of a strange kid, but like practiced real hard, had like a overbearing mother, but like who she was just kind of projecting her own childhood of her father, like really wanting her to succeed as a pianist onto
Yeah.
him. Yeah, I felt like it was like a really realistic way of telling a story of a boy dying, and I thought it was valuable for that. But I could see it going in the route of like, yeah, like the cat goddess. I can't remember her name anymore.
Mayette.
Yeah, the cat goddess Mayette. Like, yeah, I could see how it like.
Slash, what was the actual cat's name, by the way? Because the cat also
Oh,
stands in for Mayette.
yes, especially at the end there. Yeah, yeah, I could see her blessing him and like accepting his soul as on to the next life into like her city, her utopia. But it could be interpreted that way as like her giving him a second chance at life, but
I mean, you could even interpret it as he's already lived his full life mentally in that imaginative state.
right. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
I did think the ending, like the very end, was quite clever, where it switches back and forth between Anubis telling the story and also your mom telling the story. It's more meaningful to me if it's actually that is ultimately your mother telling the story and then you interpreting it through it, as opposed to they just happen to tell the same story at the end.
You're saying is like it's almost like a coping mechanism for the boy himself to imagine this Anubis and Mayette character, and
To me, coping is like a bit too negative. It's
I think
a
that
bit,
can I jump in and say
yeah,
that
you go in.
a lot of people would imagine their death viewed through, if they're raised Christian, they're going to view it as they're ascending to heaven's light. But his was clearly based around the beach with the seagulls, the boat that he
Mhm.
had as a child that he was literally sitting in. Anubis was like one of the few things that he could remember from school, clearly.
right.
Anubis was one of the few afterlife creatures that he could imagine. And he's like not very godly in a way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So he's kind of just imagining it in the way that a child would. He's taken all the information he's had in his short life and come up with this image in his head.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Mhm.
I feel like I have to play the ending again now. I want to see what you're talking about, Scott, with him potentially being gifted an extra chance at life. But
I could be wrong after what Dylan said. When I rewatched it, I was like, "Oh man, interesting."
I mean, it's an art medium, so it is up to interpretation.
Okay, so I think one of the biggest things about the game that I wanted more of was, like I mentioned earlier, was Conchsters.
Yeah. Yeah. When's the Constantine spin-off?
Yeah, man.
All of the development time went into making the mini game of playing piano. They should have made more time into fully fledging this Consters game into at least a mini game in itself.
Listen, there's going to be a updated version where you can become an esports legend in Conchsters.
Yeah.
You get
Yeah.
dude, I just love the names of some of the Conchsters because I wrote them down here. Like
Yeah.
Lobstar is obviously a very easy one. Barnacles is great.
Oh,
Shrump.
sure. Wait,
There's
which one is Shrimp? Is he a shrimp?
yeah.
Yeah.
There's Clam Dunk and then Anenemigo.
Oh man, I would choose Clam Dunk. I feel like that would be my starter.
I just like Shrump.
Shrimp.
What if they update the game, like follow Scott's interpretation where he gets second life, and then yeah, he becomes like the developer for like the gritty reboot of Conch Stars, like the God of War reboot.
I mean, it'd be on track for his character. It's like an art side
Yeah.
of video game development. He could go into like making
Yeah.
3D models or concept art or something.
It makes sense. I think this is canonically what the real ending is.
Yeah.
Of course. I think though, if they ever did do a remake, I know that they don't have it in VR headsets where they know if your eyes are open or closed yet, but I feel like this game would have been better realized in VR.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking that
Yeah.
as well.
The benefit is more accessible the way it's made, where I mean technically you don't even need the webcam.
Yeah, of course. I'm just saying that like just that first person,
Mhm.
No, it definitely needs
Especially
like a VR version.
especially with like the way VR games kind of are now, not all of them, but a lot of the good experiences are very similar to this game where you're in a single spot, you're not moving around a lot, so it's not kind of attributing to your motion sickness. It's a very narrative heavy game, and like wireless VR controllers, you could do like a lot of the actions in the game you have to do anyway. So yeah, maybe in the future they'll remake it for VR, and I feel like I would love to play this game in VR if they did that. Like it
Yeah.
would really add to the immersion.
I think
Yeah.
incorporating the movement into like actual head movements, and near the end when you have the visualization of pain like coming at you, I think
Mhm.
that would be actually a much better experience.
Yeah,
Be
that pain.
terrifying.
Yeah, it'd be absolutely terrifying, which is kind of ideal for what's
Yeah,
going on.
the representation of the virus and like the pain was very effective just on a flat screen. I feel like in VR it would be like so much more overbearing and like awkward.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, do we want to talk about some of the concepts that were in the game as far as like themes and just ideas? Because I just wrote down a couple things like just we've kind of already touched on like artistic expression and individuality already with the art school and Benji.
Yeah.
Is it Benny or Benji? I can't remember now.
I think they call him Benny, and then his name is actually Benjamin.
Okay,
Mhm.
I think I've been accidentally calling him Benji the entire time, but
I
people know
think
who I'm
that's
talking
acceptable.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the main, maybe one of the biggest themes is like dealing with mortality.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
totally.
as a kid, like it's pretty hard to wrap your head around it. I guess it's first introduced through pets as
Mhm.
we're shown in the game of the horrific death of those kittens.
Yeah.
Which, okay, here's my question. Because actually, the kitten death is the one part where I did kind of think, kind of impressed with this graphically. On the other hand, I'm wondering how horrifying you actually want that moment to be for the audience.
Dylan's like, I want to see the tendons snapping and
Yeah, like I was like, I should be more horrified by this, but also, do I want to be more horrified by this?
where's the aqueous humor oozing out of their dead eyes? Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
I feel like they did a really good job at conveying the grotesqueness of it just through the audio alone, especially in that first scene where
Yeah.
you can't see out of the doors. Like they did a great job at conveying how disgusting it is. Just the meaty sounds of the chewing and like the
Yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
first time, it's like, what the fuck is going on? Like when you're just approaching the door with the sounds. Like,
yeah, I had a pretty good idea of what was going on because the kittens had been introduced so recently, and then approaching the door and hearing that sound. Growing up in the forested area that we did, it's not something that I hadn't been exposed to before in real life. So almost immediately I was like, oh my gosh, that's probably the cat, like your pet cat, or the kittens getting eaten. And
But it is an interesting point of like he represses that because it is pretty traumatic. I can't.
definitely.
Yeah.
he represses it not just because it's traumatic too, but also because it teaches him a lesson about how brief life is and how
Mhm.
that is tying into his current circumstances,
True.
which is why he didn't reveal it to Anubis.
Mm.
Yeah. I think everyone, no matter if you're 90 or if you're 11 years old, you're all of a sudden like, man, life is so short.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I know you guys haven't read Sandman, but one of my favorite things I've ever heard in that was everyone gets a lifetime.
Mhm.
Like,
I have read Sandman. I remember that line, and that's
oh, you have.
yeah.
Cool.
In terms of the themes, so okay, here's something I just wanted to run by you guys. So my interpretation of the main theme is trying to make sense of your life at the end when you've sort of in your own eyes failed to accomplish a great task, and it's Benjamin making sense of how his brief life was actually meaningful.
I think that this plays into another aspect where what is success or failure in life? And the concept is imposed on him by his mom. And
Mhm.
that's imposed on her because of her dad. It's like it's this parental pressure thing that keeps going on and on until someone
Yeah.
breaks that cycle.
It's like a parent like trying to get them to become like a pro baseball player or something like that. It's like
Yeah, trying to live through your own kids.
Yeah, if it was the dad, if this was the dad that was the overbearing parent, he'd be like, "Come on, son, you gotta get that knuckleball."
yeah. Or his specific dad in the game being like, "Come on, son, you got to get really into nautical history and stuff like that," because he was a professor
Oh,
of
Oh
right.
yeah.
like
Yes.
ships and stuff.
That was such a funny little tidbit. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Come on, it's a frigate, not a galleon.
yeah. I know it's a little sidetracked. I really like the party scene where like you can overhear them talking about the dad and what he does. He's like, "What do you do anyway?" He's like, I'm a professor of nautical things,
Nautical history.
nautical history," and they're like, "Oh, okay, so nothing really."
I
No,
missed that.
the mom says something real catty,
Oh
like,
yeah. Oh no, I do remember this.
"Oh, someone actually says something like, "Oh, I don't know anything about that. So what's that like?" And it's like, "Well, it's one way to kill a party."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The mom was sometimes really like snooty or like had some funny attitude towards the dad. Sometimes I thought their dynamic was pretty funny, even though
Again, the dynamic is so played out, but it was still kind of it was still just an honest thing, right? Like, just because it's cliche doesn't mean it's not true.
yeah, it was charming for most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
For well, I mean, it gets pretty. Yeah, it gets pretty mean at places. Like the
Mhm.
mom, pretty brutal. Actually, so one thing I want to break off and say is that I also found the characterization of the mom really interesting because she wasn't simply an overbearing mom the entire time. And even from the beginning, she gave indication that she knew what she was doing was kind of bad.
Mm.
Like there was clearly some conflict about like should I put too much pressure on or like how much is too much. When I failed my recital, she actually legitimately said like maybe I put too much pressure on you.
Mm.
and actually was willing to admit like I might have made a mistake.
Okay.
She absolutely knows she knows firsthand because clearly the pressure came from her father.
Right.
Mhm.
So she knows that she can go too far but she knows that, like, she can push her son into greatness if she wants to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it is one of those things that it's like, do you want to push your son into something that you don't know if they're gonna love, right?
Yeah. See, that's something I missed with my playthrough because my Benjamin was so successful at the recital or tryout that like the car ride home, she was like, "You did amazing!" Like, even if like she was kind of preemptively preparing you for failure though, anyway. But she was saying even if they don't get back to you and say that you got accepted, like you did amazing in my eyes. Like you totally impressed everyone. You impressed me, kind of thing. And
That's what's so interesting is like even in success she is willing to say like, you know, you did it ultimately for yourself and you
Mhm.
did really well and you don't need external validation, even though she clearly runs on external validation herself.
Yeah.
It's a hard habit to break off from, I think, and she's clearly very loving, though. The entire
Mhm.
time, I could tell that she was loving, and both parents were,
Yeah.
just different ways.
Yeah, yeah, I still really liked her character and the father as well. I felt the mother was a bit more deep of a character because of all this family history with her father and stuff.
My interpretation overall of the story is that in terms of processing complex emotions and ideas, it's really, really well done and amazing. I really like how it gets at that tension between the need for like good artistic expression versus trying to make sense of meaningful life if you haven't really done that much, or like the value of an ordinary life. I feel though, this is the one thing that kind of keeps me back. I'm wondering how you two are going to react to this. I feel that the view on like death and sort of making sense of your life is meant to tap in these sort of grand universalizable themes. And I feel like that doesn't quite work because in this case, the life he lived was quite good overall and only really faced a major injustice at the end. I'm not sure how well the lesson would work if he had faced some sort of major injustice throughout his life. How satisfying the overall ending would be.
Oh, like, if this was you're saying if this was a child in a third world country who has
Hmm.
Yeah.
known nothing but strife and hardship.
Yeah. Even just like some major injustice going on in their life, like abuse or like something happens to their family externally that they have to live with longer term. The overall lesson of the story, I feel, is trying to reach the sort of universal standpoint ending about making sense of your life. I feel like that lesson becomes harder to swallow if someone faces major injustices throughout their life
There
or
are
some
people
sort of
who live
strife.
absolutely horrible lives, and it's fucking heartbreaking. Like, there is no sense in that. There is no sense in it at all. It's just some people have to live these hell lives, and
Exactly. And I don't want to say, oh, the story like doesn't touch on that, so it's bad. I definitely don't want to say that. And I don't even want to say the story needs to change in a major way to be better. I think overall the story is extremely tightly written. Maybe could use a bit less cliches at times, but very well written overall, very concrete. Basically the story is very completely written. The way Benjamin's characterized, the way that the decisions and what you see, even what you see in the game, builds into his character, how his mom's constructed, how everything is constructed, is all beautifully cohesive. So I don't want to say, oh, because he's not like in some oppressed third world country or face like abuse, like outright abuse from one of his parents, it's a bad story. What I feel though is that the way the story ends up positioning itself as a universal ending about making sense of your life is sort of, you don't have to process a very difficult idea to reach that conclusion. It's you're processing more complex ideas about conflict within the need to achieve versus an ordinary life, but it doesn't quite reach that universal ending that I think it's ultimately positioned as, if that makes sense.
If I can reiterate what you're trying to say, I think um, it's not a universal ending for people who have had hard lives.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially that it's not a convincing lesson in the sense that the main character had a relatively easy life up until getting sick, and then the main thing that they had to fight through ends up killing them. So because that's the end, that kind of puts a neat bow on things. He doesn't have to then live with something hard throughout an extended period, which is, I think, what people end up struggling with and what ends up actually impacting people in terms of making their lives meaningful
Mm.
in the end.
Oh, I see. What you're trying wait, sorry, I misunderstood maybe before, but you're trying to say that people tend to carry the weight of their past with them for a long time, and
Yes.
that can be almost harder than dying.
Yes, I think
Right.
that's what I'm
Okay.
trying to say. That he
Yeah.
doesn't have to carry a huge weight up until his death.
Right. Oh,
Mm.
and I can see how that could totally affect the story because he gets accepted into the Eternal City afterlife by the cat goddess at the end because he's like it's basically saying that he's a good person, so he deserves it, and his life was cut off short. But yeah, I could see where if it was a separate scenario where he had some sort of chronic, like something to deal with his entire life, like an abusive parent or that disease had been with him his entire childhood and then finally kills him at the end, maybe that constant pain it would change his personality to be more negative and then would make him maybe less of a good person because of it, and that having him not be accepted into the afterlife, so to speak.
I feel like I need to unpack what you just said there
Yeah.
because the implication of having to live through a hellish life only to be met with just like not getting into paradise
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you lived a shit life and couldn't get a good attitude about it. Like
Yeah. I'm
that's
trying to
bad.
say is that, like, if that scenario had been different, it almost would have been unjust because of that, because it's not necessarily in this kid's control to get sick. In this hypothetical situation where he has a harder life growing up and changes his personality because of it. Yeah,
I
like
feel like you're touching on why none of us are religious.
yeah, like, it's unjust, really, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
deeper topic, but yeah.
Yeah.
Nope, we're getting into all of it today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
No,
I
we're
mean
unpacking everything.
yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of indicative of what the theme of this game ends up being.
Like I said, this is a deep game.
It is
It's
very
got some
deep.
depth to it. It makes you think about a lot of things. Can I say a quote that the dad said that really hit? Especially
Sure,
because I
yeah, of
feel
course.
like the game is literally doing what this quote is. It's when the dad is listening to his wife's piano piece, and you're listening to it from your bedroom, and and she asks, "How? What did you think of it?" And he's trying to find the words, and he's like, "Well, if the unspeakable darkness I'm carrying can be so well expressed, maybe it's not so unspeakable."
Oh, yes, I forgot about that line.
I just loved that line because that
That's
is
a
like
great line.
art. That is art. That is like the
Yeah,
shit that it's like we can't express everything just through our words. Again, we've
mhm.
mentioned Darren before. He's our linguist friend. We have limitations with our languages. We need to use symbols and music.
Yeah, having the ability to convey thoughts and feelings, when it's done right, it can really, like, be cathartic for people. In that moment, it helps the dad kind of reframe that the darkness maybe is a bit more manageable because it can be expressed properly.
It's something to do with that unknown. It's hard to talk about something you don't know. So when you can express it, it's easier to deal with.
That's why it's so important to talk about your problems and stuff.
Nope, you just bottle them up, boys.
Yep.
The tried and true method. Stiff upper lip.
But yeah, no, yeah, my feelings actually were very much, oh yeah, it was a very emotional game for me. I
Mhm.
thought, yeah.
Mhm. Okay, well, with all that said, what was your overall thoughts about the game? Like, did you like it? Did you hate it? What do you think? We'll start with you, Dylan.
I liked it a lot. It's a game that I feel more positive about the more I sit on it, which I didn't expect going in. I came in it with like even a slightly hostile attitude. Like I'm coming in expecting this to be good, but with these issues and these issues and these issues. And overall, I actually don't have many negative feelings about the game. I thought it was a really well done story. It had an interesting mechanic. I'm glad I played it. I could even see myself playing it again at some point, just re-experience it, which I don't do with a lot of games. So
Hmm.
I really liked it.
Nice. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I suppose to wrap up my thoughts on the game, I thought it was an amazing experience, an emotionally charged one. The gameplay itself, again, it's hard to rate games based off of other games. Why the hell would I ever compare this to anything like Tunic that we played on the
Or
previous
Elden
episode,
Ring?
or Elden Ring?
Let's just compare every game going forward to Elden Ring.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me just say that this is definitely the Dark Souls of emotional games. Um, I think that the game is quite self-aware, especially with the one of the later quotes in the game of Anubis saying, maybe it's not the grandest story with the grandest words, but grand words and stories, I think they may be overrated.
Yeah,
I like that one too.
some good quotes.
Yeah, no, the game was definitely tough to get through. At certain times, just very heart-wrenching
Hmm.
storytelling, but simple storytelling. And this is one of those times where, yeah, stories in video games can be told in such a diverse way. Overall, the game was a well done story.
Hmm. Yeah, I personally really liked it as well. Like, despite some of the technical issues it had, and even though I didn't play it in the intended method of using a webcam, I still found it to be well worth the 2 hours it took me basically to complete it. Like less than 2 hours. It was a beautifully told story, like really heart wrenching at like two particular moments. Like in the first life playthrough when the mom dies, and then in the second playthrough when you end up dying when you're on that deathbed and your mom's reading out the story, and then when Anubis is reading off his story, like something about that was just so emotional and touching, and I was crying not because my eyes had been open for so long, but because of the emotion and stuff.
Yeah, I will also say that that ending to the game, no improvements can be made on that, in my opinion. This felt like that is the perfect ending to that experience that I just had.
Mm,
Yeah, totally.
yeah. Well, okay. Well, I think that kind of brings us to the end of our discussion with Before Your Eyes. If you really did enjoy the game like we did, I highly recommend checking out Jacob Geller's YouTube channel and his Before Your Eyes video essay. He's a really good YouTuber in general, but it really delves into the art and a lot of the themes in the game. So, yeah, check out his channel. I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Before we go, next episode we'll be talking about and playing Stray, a cat game where you play as a cat in a cyberpunk style future where there seems to be no more humanoids left. Only thing that's populating the city is robots, and it's a very basic platformer. So play that and look forward to the next episode. I'm Levi. I've been joined by Scott and Dylan. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're listening on your favorite podcatcher, follow and subscribe there for more episodes in the future. This has been Very Good Video Games. We will see you next time.
She accepts. Close your eyes now and keep them closed. She's gonna let you in. Go on. You know what to do.
Why is he smiling like that?
It must be somewhere that he likes.